Hello, hello! Welcome to my kitchen. This is Sonila from MediterraneanLatinLoveAffair.com, and today we'll make baklava, or the way we say it in my native country of Albania, baklava. Today's baklava will be made from scratch. We'll make phyllo pastry. We'll open all the phyllo layers and we'll fill it with a walnut sugar filling, and we'll drizzle and soak the baklava with sugar syrup that has cloves and lemon in it. This is the way my mom used to make baklava. For us Albanians, baklava used to be the traditional New Year's Eve, New Year's Day dessert, but also baklava is used in a lot of religious celebrations as well as any other big celebrations in the family, like birthdays and anniversaries. I hope you enjoy this baklava. Today's baklava is a medium-sized one. I use a 33-34 centimeter diameter baking tray. It has to be a deep dish baking tray, otherwise you won't have enough space for the layers of phyllo to create like the baklava. If you are using frozen pastry sheets, then you can use a rectangular baking tray, but for homemade phyllo layers it's better to use a round one. In Albania we make different types of baklavas, and the bigger one is about this big. So if you're making a bigger baklava, I suggest you double up on the measurements I'll give you today for the phyllo pastry. For the phyllo pastry, we'll need about 1 kilogram, which turns out to be about roughly 8 cups of all-purpose flour. I used organic all-purpose flour, unbleached. So we have 8 cups of flour here. We'll open a well on the flour, add half a tablespoon of salt. Then we'll add 5 eggs, just the egg yolks. We'll reserve the egg whites for later. They can be used for breakfast, they can be used in all kinds of other recipes. Okay, and the egg yolk goes in. Repeat with the other eggs. Finally, the last egg. Okay, so we start mixing the egg yolks with the flour slowly into the well. Okay, we'll add 1 cup of oil. You can use the oil of your choice. I prefer using olive oil. And 1.5 cup of warm water. Continue working the flour into the well. Fold the flour in and make a dough with all the ingredients. Okay. The dough will be sticky initially, so if it's too soft, you can add about 1 to 2 tablespoons of flour and adjust as needed. Continue kneading through the dough about 5 minutes or so. We'll create a floured surface. Make sure the counter or the surface where you are placing the dough is perfectly clean, and then continue working the dough until it becomes elastic. The way I'm used to kneading the dough is I grab from the outer surfaces, fold it inside, roll it, and then repeat the process. Our dough for baklava is ready. We'll let the dough rest. I'll cover it up with cling wrap and I'll let it rest for about half an hour. Okay, so when the dough is resting, it's time to enjoy a Turkish coffee. We'll let the dough rest for about 30 minutes and we'll come back and try to separate the dough into specific Phyllo layers, and let's see how many we get. For the traditional Albanian baklava, we'll use about 1 pound of walnuts for the filling. However, different types of baklavas will have different fillings. For example, in Greece, you can have besides walnut baklava, you can have baklavas made with almonds or pistachios. In Turkey, you can have a pistachio baklava or a hazelnut baklava, or different countries will have also a mix of different nuts for the filling, so you can try your favorite filling for the baklava. Usually what I do is I buy walnuts that are already halved, and then I'll pulse them on the blender with a little bit of sugar to give them a little bit of sweetness. You don't want to blend them to the point where they become powder. You just want to give it a little bit of pulse just to chop them up in smaller pieces. So for this size baklava tray, 1 pound of walnuts is more than enough. Usually I'll create only 1 layer of filling. However, there are different types of baklavas where you'll have 2-3 layers of filling. However, my preferred way is just 1 layer of filling in the middle and about 30 layers of Phyllo on the bottom, 30 layers of Phyllo on top. While the dough is resting, start melting butter in low heat, about 3 to 4 sticks of butter. You'll need them to open the Phyllo layers as well as for drenching the baklava before baking it. When melting the butter, you'll notice that there will be a white layer on the bottom, and we don't need that. We'll just transfer to a clean container just the melted butter, but we'll skim away this white part because that tends to color the layers of Phyllo, and the baklava won't look as pretty, as uniform. Okay, I'll try to skim some more butter from here so we don't waste it, but I'll definitely avoid getting any of this white substance. So this is the melted butter we'll use. Okay, at this point the dough will be ready. We'll give it a good mix. I'll cut it in half. I'll get a tray with parchment paper. That's where I'll put each piece of dough rolls that we'll create from this. Okay, a good mix. Make each quarter of the dough into a cylinder shape and then start cutting it in smaller pieces. Okay. These small dough rolls in my native language are called kulach. So the dimensions of kulach will really depend on how big your baking tray will be. For the bigger types of baking tray, we'll use bigger kulach. For the smaller one, this is about 15 inches, 33 centimeters, we'll use smaller ones. So determine how big you make your dough rolls based on how big the baking tray that you're using is. Knead and roll each one of them and put them on parchment paper. Okay, so we're gonna get started now with the process of opening or rolling each of the Phyllo layers. We'll use this dough rolls that we created earlier, and I'll use this rolling stick, which in Albania is called oklai. I won't use a regular rolling pin because with the regular rolling pin I can just make the surface of the dough roll flat, but I cannot open it as thin as it needs to be for a Phyllo layer. So I'm very lucky that my mom brought this to me from Albania. I'm pretty sure you can find it in different markets like Etsy or Amazon, but I'm thankful I have this from my native country. So let's get started. We'll need to use some cornstarch and a flat, clean surface. We keep rotating the dough so we can flatten it uniformly on all sides. Try to make a circle, and then once you have a big enough circle, you can start rolling on top of the pin and then flatten with your hands. You start in the middle, you push to the sides. From the middle to the sides, and then you unroll it. Go to a few degrees to the right. Roll again. Repeat the process, okay? Middle to the sides. We'll sprinkle some butter at the bottom of the baking tray and start placing the Phyllo layers one by one in. Okay, if any of the layers is bigger than the tray, we can cut on the corners, and you can do one of two things with the remaining Phyllo layers. One, you can place it on top and try to create one layer just with the extras, or you can save the extras and make a different dish on the side once you're done with the baklava. My kids love this. I usually roll it up with some feta and eggs and create burečka. So I save this on the side for burečka. Experienced Phyllo dough makers, they make very thin Phyllo layers. not wrinkled, their layers don't break in the middle. I haven't opened, we call it PET. I haven't opened Phyllo layers in a very long time. So this is all coming back to me right now. And I'm having so many memories of back home when we used to make this for New Year's with my mom. If the layer wrinkles, it's pretty elastic. You can just push it with your hands and it will open up. Even if your Phyllo layer becomes bigger than the tray you are placing it, don't worry, open it as much as you can, because the thinner the Phyllo layers, the better your baklava will be. So even if it's bigger, you can cut along the sides. Okay. Another Phyllo layer done. Okay, and we continue like this little by little until we are halfway through. Once we are halfway through all the layers, then we'll add the filling, but we are pretty far from halfway. So this is a long process. It's not a quick recipe. It takes almost the whole day to get this done. So you need patience and you need stamina. But if you are nostalgic to the days where your mom or your grandma made homemade Phyllo and homemade baklava, this is the recipe for you. So let's continue with more Phyllo layers. Okay, this is the last layer before the filling. Little thickness here, okay. Okay, now we'll add the filling to the baklava. This filling is walnut and sugar. I just pulsed it on the blender. Don't blend it too much because it will become almost like a powder substance. You want to make sure you have an even layer of the filling, not too thick, not too thin. Spread it evenly all the way to the edges of the baking tray. Okay, we're halfway done. Let's continue. And the last layer is going in. Here we go, 2 hours of rolling Phyllo, and finally we have the pre-baked baklava. Now that the baklava is ready, all the layers are placed in. We'll have to cut it. We'll have to cut it before we bake it, and then we'll put some butter on it. It's a lot of butter, but that's the way it works. That's why it tastes so good. And that's why, at least, you know, back when I lived in Albania, that's why we made it only for New Year's, like once a year. So it's not something you eat very often. There's a lot of sugar, a lot of syrup, a lot of butter, and a lot of dough. And maybe that's why it's so delicious. So we'll start cutting the baklava. You need a sharp knife, and just hold on to the layers so you don't just flip it open by mistake. Voila, the baklava is cut. Look how pretty it looks. There are millions ways of cutting it. You can just create rhombus shapes, whichever way you want. You can just cut straight in columns and then go diagonal, or you can do it like this, radiating from the middle out. It's whatever it's easier for you, okay? Okay, now that the baklava is cut, we'll pour butter over the baklava. I melted about 4 sticks of butter, and I used part of it to put to sprinkle a little bit of butter in between layers as I was placing them on the tray, and the rest I'll pour it over right now. Just go systematically over each and single row and pour butter over it. You want to make sure you cover everything in butter. If you have any leftover, just pour it over the edges so it can go in from the inner side. Okay, the baklava is ready to bake. We'll bake the baklava for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours. It depends a little bit on the type of oven you have. I start at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. In Celsius, that's about 180, so technically you want to start at about 170 degrees Celsius for about 10-15 minutes max after the oven is preheated. As soon as it starts getting some color on the upper layer of the phyllo, then you lower it to about 150 degrees Celsius. That's about, you lower it at about 310-315 degrees Fahrenheit, and then we'll leave it there baking for about 2 hours. I'll check often on the baklava, maybe every 20 minutes or so. In the beginning, not so much, but then afterwards, once it's at 310-315 degrees Fahrenheit, the first hour maybe you don't need to check so much, but after the first hour, I check every 20 minutes or so to make sure it's not getting burnt, it's not getting overly colorful on top. If so, then I'll put an aluminum foil on top to protect the upper layer, because you want you want the baklava to bake really well on the inside, since we'll put syrup on it. So you cannot have soft dough layers because they'll turn into mush from the syrup. You want to make sure every layer is very well baked. And then if the top gets burned and the middle is still mush, the baklava is not going to taste so good. So you want to make sure everything is well baked but not burned. So that's why we keep monitoring it every 20 minutes once it's in the oven. Hi friends, we're back. The baklava is ready. It's been baking for about 2 hours and 15 minutes in my oven. If you're baking your own, again, try to check with your type of oven how long it will take to bake. I have the cold syrup here already. The syrup I made with 3 cups of sugar, 4 cups of water, 4 cloves, and 1 lemon slice. I boiled the syrup. You don't mix it when you boil it, so the syrup will become, if you mix it, it will become a little grainy, and you'll notice the sugar in it. But if you let it boil on its own and then lower it to simmer, let it simmer for 15 minutes or so, then the syrup will be very syrupy, liquid, very see-through. So that's what we want. I removed the lemon and the cloves in the meantime, and I have a cold syrup. Voila, the baklava is ready. At this point, we'll pour syrup on the baklava. So there are 2 rules about pouring syrup on the baklava. You either need the baklava to be hot and the syrup to be cold, or the other way around. You can let the baklava cool overnight. I think that's the best case scenario. Let the baklava cool overnight and prepare the syrup, but you can still pour the syrup hot on a cold baklava. If you're in a hurry, you can just have prepared the syrup beforehand, and as soon as the baklava is out of the oven, you can put the syrup in. You want to spread the syrup over the baklava evenly, making sure that you put some syrup over each slice of baklava. Now the mix for the syrup, I personally don't like the syrup to be overly sweet. So you can choose to use a different ratio of water and sugar for your syrup. As far as how to store the baklava, I remember back home we used to leave it 8-9 days at room temperature, just covered. But also when we made baklava, it was end of December, early January, so it was pretty cold. I live in Florida. I don't think I can leave the baklava just in the kitchen for 8-9 days. So I think it's safe to keep it 2-3 days room temperature, but and then maybe about a week in the refrigerator, and my baklava is ready. Okay, whatever the reason you are watching my video to make the baklava, I hope you have a great time with family and friends, and I hope your baklava comes out perfect. If you have any questions, please let me know in comments. Please subscribe to my channel for more videos, and like this video if you liked how to make the baklava. And I wish you all the best. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great day. Bye. Ropavshim. You like it?
Yep.
This
it's
is
really good.
Yeah?
Tastes like a donut.
Uh-huh.
Like a glazed donut, and I really love donuts, so I like it.
It's a compliment then. Well, thank you.
Like a crunchy donut.
Like a crunchy donut, okay. I love you. The taste test for this recipe was done by my 8-year-old son Joaquin.